The autumn rain fell steadily on Rosewood Plantation that October morning in 1852, turning the carefully manicured gardens into a watercolor of brown and green. William Crawford stood at the window of his study, watching the drops streak down the glass, distorting his view of the cotton fields that stretched toward the horizon. At 48 years old, he was at the height of his power, master of 200 acres in central Mississippi, owner of 243 enslaved people, one of the wealthiest men in the county. The plantation house behind him gleamed with imported marble from Italy, wallpaper from France, and furniture from England. Every surface spoke of wealth accumulated over 3 generations of Crawford dominance. But the package that had arrived that morning sat on his desk like a coiled snake, and William couldn't bring himself to open it. The letter accompanying it was from his former business partner, Thomas Whitfield, now dead for 6 months. The envelope bore the seal of a New Orleans law firm, and the covering note explained that Mr. Whitfield's estate was settling final accounts, including the transfer of certain properties that had been held in trust. William's hands trembled slightly as he broke the wax seal. Inside was a bill of sale dated 1852, transferring ownership of an enslaved woman named Catherine from the estate of Thomas Whitfield to William Crawford. Attached to the bill of sale was a smaller envelope addressed in Thomas's familiar handwriting. To be opened by William Crawford only, regarding the woman Catherine. Read before you see her. William sat down heavily in his leather chair, the one his father had commissioned from a Boston craftsman 40 years ago. He opened Thomas's letter with fingers that had suddenly gone cold. "My dear William," the letter began, "if you are reading this, I have passed from this world, and the arrangement I made 17 years ago must now come to an end. The woman Catherine, whom I have sent to you, is not simply property to be added to your holdings. She is your daughter, born in 1835 to a woman named Marie, who worked in your household in Natchez when you were a younger man. I know you remember Marie. How could you not? You loved her as much as a man of our position could love someone of her station." William's vision blurred. Marie. He hadn't allowed himself to think that name in years. She had been a house servant when he was 23, newly married to Eleanor, trying to establish himself as a planter. Marie had been beautiful, intelligent, educated by the Quaker family who had previously owned her. Their relationship had been brief, foolish, impossible, and when she became pregnant, William had panicked. He read on, Thomas's words bringing back memories he had buried. "You came to me in 1835, desperate to solve what you called a terrible problem. Your wife Eleanor was also with child, due around the same time as Marie. You couldn't have a mixed-race baby born on your plantation. The scandal would have destroyed your marriage, your standing in society, everything you were building. So we arranged a solution. I purchased Marie and took her to my townhouse in New Orleans. She gave birth there in November 1835. A daughter. You never asked about the child, and I never told you. I raised her as my ward, educated her, protected her. Her name is Catherine." The letter continued in Thomas's precise handwriting. "Marie died of fever when Catherine was 7 years old. Before she died, she made me promise that Catherine would never know she was enslaved, would never be sold, would be educated and given as much freedom as our world allows. I kept that promise for 17 years. Catherine believes herself to be a free woman of color, the daughter of Marie and an unknown father. She has been educated in literature, music, mathematics, and languages. She speaks French, English, and some Spanish. She plays piano beautifully. She has read more books than most white men of our acquaintance. But I am dying, William. The doctors say I have perhaps 6 months, and I have no heirs, no one to continue protecting Catherine after I'm gone. Under Louisiana law, she is still enslaved property, part of my estate. When I die, she will be sold to settle my debts unless I make other arrangements. So I am making them. I am transferring her ownership to you, her biological father, with a letter explaining everything. What you do with this knowledge, with her, is now your choice. You can acknowledge her as your daughter and grant her freedom, or you can keep her enslaved and pretend you never received this letter. The choice reveals who you truly are. The letter ended with a postscript. She arrives knowing nothing of this arrangement. She believes she is traveling to Mississippi to work as a governess for a wealthy family, a free woman taking a position. The truth about her legal status and her parentage is yours to reveal or conceal. Choose wisely, old friend. Our souls may depend on it. William sat motionless for a long time after finishing the letter. Outside, the rain continued to fall. Somewhere in the house, his wife Eleanor was instructing the cook about the evening meal. His legitimate children, Margaret, now 16, and William Jr., age 14, were in the parlor with their tutors. The life he had built with such care, such calculation, was proceeding exactly as it should. And into that carefully ordered world was about to walk his daughter, a girl who didn't know she was enslaved and didn't know he was her father. The butler knocked softly. "Sir, the woman from New Orleans has arrived. She's waiting in the entrance hall as you requested." William stood, straightened his jacket, and walked to the door with the measured pace of a man approaching his own execution. The entrance hall was designed to impress. A sweeping staircase, chandelier imported from Paris, floors of Italian marble that echoed every footstep. Standing in the center of this opulence was a young woman who looked nothing like he had imagined and everything like he had feared. Catherine was 17 years old, tall for a woman at perhaps 5 feet 7 inches, with skin the color of amber in afternoon light. Her features were fine, delicate, with high cheekbones that came from Marie, and a nose that was unmistakably Crawford in its aristocratic straightness. Her eyes were green. His eyes, the distinctive Crawford green that appeared in portraits of his ancestors going back generations. She wore a traveling dress of dark blue wool, well made but not ostentatious, and carried herself with the bearing of someone educated and confident. She was beautiful in a way that made William's chest ache with recognition and dread. "Mr. Crawford?" she said, her voice cultured and clear, with the slight French accent that came from growing up in New Orleans. "I am Catherine Beaumont. Mr. Whitfield's law firm arranged this position for me. I understand you require a governess for your daughter?" William found his voice with difficulty. "Yes. Welcome to Rosewood." He couldn't say more. The resemblance was too strong, too obvious. How had Thomas thought this would work? How could William possibly hide who she was when every feature proclaimed their connection? "Thank you, sir. I'm very grateful for this opportunity." She smiled, and William saw Marie in that smile. The warmth, the intelligence, the unconscious grace that had captured his foolish heart 17 years ago. "I've brought my references from New Orleans. I taught at a school for free colored children for 2 years. I'm proficient in French, English, music, and mathematics. I hope my qualifications are satisfactory." "I'm sure they are," William managed. Perhaps we should discuss the details of your employment in my study." As she followed him down the corridor, William's mind raced through impossible calculations. Thomas's letter had laid out the situation with brutal clarity. Catherine believed herself to be free. But legally, she was enslaved property, transferred to William's ownership. If he revealed the truth, both truths, her status and her parentage, it would destroy her understanding of herself and her world. If he concealed it, he would be perpetuating a lie that Thomas had spent 17 years maintaining. And Eleanor? William's wife knew nothing of Marie, nothing of the child born in that New Orleans townhouse, nothing of her husband's youthful mistakes. In his study, William closed the door and gestured to a chair. Catherine sat with perfect posture, hands folded in her lap, clearly accustomed to formal interviews. She looked at him with those green eyes, his eyes, and William felt the full weight of what Thomas had done by sending her here. "Miss Beaumont," he began, then stopped. Beaumont. Even the name was a lie. Marie's last name had been something else, something African that William had never learned because he had never asked. Thomas had given Catherine a French surname, creating a fiction of free-colored ancestry that would grant her at least some protection in New Orleans society. "Sir?" Catherine prompted gently. "Is something wrong? If my qualifications are insufficient—" "No," William interrupted. "Your qualifications are more than adequate. I'm sure you'll be an excellent governess for my daughter. It's just—" He paused, looking at her, seeing the intersection of past and present, of sin and consequence, all embodied in this young woman who had no idea she was sitting in her father's house, speaking to the man who had abandoned her mother and never acknowledged her existence. "Sir, if I may ask," Catherine said, her voice showing the first hint of uncertainty. "You seem troubled. If there's some concern about my position here, I would prefer to know now rather than begin under false pretenses." False pretenses. The phrase struck William with almost physical force. Everything about this situation was false pretense. But how could he tell her the truth? How could he look at this poised, educated young woman and say, "You are my daughter. I abandoned your mother. You are legally my slave, and I'm hiding all of this from my family upstairs?" Before William could respond, the study door opened without warning. Eleanor Crawford swept in, elegant in a green silk dress that matched her gray-streaked hair. "William, Margaret is asking about the new governess. I thought I should meet her before—" She stopped mid-sentence, seeing Catherine for the first time. Eleanor's face went very still, her eyes moving from Catherine to William and back again. She was not a stupid woman. She had been married to William for 23 years, had borne him 2 children, had learned to navigate the complex social world of Mississippi plantation society. And she saw immediately what William had hoped to conceal. "Eleanor," William said, standing, "this is Miss Catherine Beaumont, from New Orleans. She's here to—" "I can see what she's here to do," Eleanor interrupted, her voice cold. "What I cannot quite understand is why she's here at all." Her eyes fixed on Catherine with an expression that was not quite hostility, but something sharper than curiosity. "Miss Beaumont, would you excuse us? I need to speak with my husband privately." Catherine stood, confused by the tension crackling in the room. "Of course, Mrs. Crawford. Should I wait in the entrance hall?" "No," Eleanor said, still looking at William. "Go to the kitchen. Tell them I sent you. Someone will show you to the servants' quarters." The casual dismissal, the ordering her to the servants' quarters. Catherine's face showed the first flicker of alarm. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Crawford, but I believe there's been some confusion. I'm here as a governess, not a servant. Mr. Whitfield's firm arranged—" "Go to the kitchen," Eleanor repeated, her voice like steel wrapped in silk. "Now." Catherine looked at William, seeking some explanation, some defense. William said nothing. After a moment, Catherine left, closing the door softly behind her. The silence that followed was suffocating. Eleanor walked to William's desk, saw Thomas's letter lying there, picked it up and read it with the same careful attention she gave to everything. William watched his wife's face as she read, saw the tightening around her mouth, the slight tremor in her hands. When she finished, she set the letter down precisely where she'd found it. "How long have you known?" she asked. "I received the letter this morning. I had no idea before today." "Eleanor, I swear to you, don't." She held up one hand. "Don't swear anything. Don't make promises. Don't lie to me more than you already have." She walked to the window, looking out at the rain that was still falling. "She has your eyes, William. Anyone who looks at her will see it. Margaret will see it. William Jr. will see it. Every guest who comes to this house will see it." "I know," William said miserably. "Thomas put me in an impossible position. He should have never sent her here." "Thomas," Eleanor said, her voice dripping with contempt, "did what good Christians do. He took care of a child when the child's father wouldn't. He educated her, protected her, gave her 17 years of believing she was free and valuable and human. And now he's dead. And you have to decide what kind of man you are. Are you going to tell her the truth?" William felt trapped between equally terrible choices. "If I tell her she's enslaved, it will destroy her. She's lived her entire life believing she was free. How can you not?" Eleanor interrupted. "She's standing in a slave-holding household believing she's a free governess. What happens when someone orders her to do something and she refuses because she thinks she has rights? What happens when she tries to leave and discovers she can't? You've put her in a position where the truth is going to come out, William, one way or another. The only question is whether it comes from you with some measure of honesty, or from someone else with cruelty." "And her parentage?" William asked. "Do I tell her that too? That I'm her father?" Eleanor's laugh was bitter. "Do you want to? Do you want to claim her as your daughter, acknowledge her, legitimize her in any way? Or do you want to keep pretending you never had a relationship with her mother, never fathered a child out of wedlock, never abandoned a woman who loved you?" The accusation hung in the air. William had never told Eleanor about Marie. How did she know Marie had loved him? Unless... "You knew?" he said slowly. "You knew about Marie?" "Of course I knew," Eleanor said wearily. "I'm not blind, William. You were 23 years old, newly married, completely transparent in your guilt. You came home from that trip to Natchez different, distant, troubled. And then Marie disappeared, sold away conveniently just when your conscience might have started bothering you. I suspected. And when our daughter was born the same month that girl would have given birth, I knew. I chose not to confront you because what would it accomplish? The child was gone, Marie was gone, and I had my own baby to care for." William sat down heavily. "Why didn't you say something?" "Because I wanted our marriage to work. Because I wanted to believe you would grow into a better man. Because in our world, William, women don't have the luxury of demanding perfect morality from their husbands. We survive. We make the best of what we're given. But I never expected you'd bring your illegitimate daughter into my house, into my children's lives, and force me to participate in whatever deception you're planning." "I didn't plan this," William protested. "Thomas sent her here without warning. I don't know what to do." "Then let me make it simple," Eleanor said. "You have 3 choices. 1. Tell Catherine the full truth about her status and her parentage. Grant her freedom, acknowledge her as your daughter, and face the social consequences. 2. Tell her she's enslaved, but hide her parentage. Keep her as a house servant, and live with the knowledge that you've reduced your own daughter to property. 3. Send her away immediately. Transfer her ownership to someone else, and pretend none of this ever happened. There must be another option, William said desperately. There must be some way to... There isn't, Eleanor interrupted. These are your choices, William. Choose. Before William could respond, there was a commotion in the hallway. Raised voices, something breaking. William and Eleanor rushed to the door and found Catherine in the corridor, holding a shattered porcelain vase facing Margaret, their daughter. Margaret's face was flushed with anger, and even from a distance, William could see the resemblance between the two girls was undeniable. Same height, similar build, and those unmistakable green Crawford eyes. She broke my vase, Margaret was saying. I asked her to clean my room. She's one of the servants, isn't she? And she refused. She said she's not a servant, she's a governess. And then she accidentally knocked over my vase. I apologize, Catherine said, her voice strained but controlled. I didn't mean to break anything. But I'm not a servant, Miss Crawford. I'm here as a governess. There's been some terrible misunderstanding. There's been no misunderstanding, Margaret snapped. Mama sent you to the kitchen. The kitchen is where the servants go. If you're not a servant, why did Mama send you there? Catherine turned to Eleanor, and William saw the fear starting to creep into her eyes. Mrs. Crawford, please. I don't understand what's happening. Mr. Whitfield's law firm arranged this position. I have papers, credentials. I can't be. Her voice faltered as she looked around at the faces surrounding her. Eleanor's cold expression, Margaret's angry confusion, William's guilty silence. And then Catherine's gaze fell on the open door to William's study, where Thomas's letter lay visible on the desk. She walked past them all, ignoring Eleanor's protest, and picked up the letter. William watched her face as she read, saw the color drain from her cheeks, saw her hands begin to shake. When she finished, she looked up at William, and in her eyes, he saw the exact moment her world shattered. This letter says I'm enslaved, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. It says I've been enslaved my entire life, that Mr. Whitfield bought my mother, that I'm property, that I've been transferred to your ownership. She paused, and when she continued, her voice broke. It says you're my father. The silence that followed was absolute. Margaret gasped. Eleanor closed her eyes, and William stood frozen, unable to speak, unable to move, unable to do anything except watch his daughter, his enslaved daughter, realize the truth that destroyed everything she believed about herself. 17 years, Catherine said, and now tears were streaming down her face. 17 years Mr. Whitfield let me believe I was free. Let me learn to read, to play music, to imagine a future. Why? Why would he do that if I was enslaved the entire time? Why would he educate a slave? Because he loved you, William said, finding his voice at last. Because your mother made him promise. Because he was a better man than I am. Catherine laughed, a sound edged with hysteria. A better man? He owned my mother. He owned me. He let me believe I had choices, a future worth. And all along, I was property. Just property. A thing to be transferred when he died, like furniture or livestock. She looked at William with those green eyes, his eyes, filled with anguish and betrayal. And you're my father. You abandoned my mother. Never acknowledged me. Never... Did you even know I existed? I knew, William admitted. I knew the day you were born. Thomas wrote to tell me. And I did nothing. I was young, scared, selfish. I had a wife, a legitimate child on the way, a reputation to protect. So I let Thomas take responsibility for my mistakes. I let your mother raise you in that New Orleans townhouse, never visiting, never asking, never. His voice broke. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Sorry, Catherine repeated. You're sorry. She set the letter down carefully, as if it might explode. What happens to me now? Do I become your house servant? Do you keep me enslaved? Do you free me? Do you acknowledge me as your daughter? Or do I remain your secret shame? William looked at Eleanor, who was watching this scene with an expression of profound sorrow. He looked at Margaret, whose face showed a complex mixture of shock, confusion, and something that might have been recognition. Recognition that this girl who looked so much like her might actually be her half-sister. And he looked at Catherine, 17 years old, her entire understanding of herself crumbling in real time. I will grant you your freedom, William said. Immediately. Legal manumission papers, everything properly documented. You're free, Catherine. You were always meant to be free. And my parentage? Catherine asked. Do you acknowledge that? William hesitated. This was the harder question. Acknowledging Catherine as his daughter meant admitting adultery, admitting to fathering a child out of wedlock, potentially challenging the inheritance rights of his legitimate children. In Mississippi society of 1852, such an admission could destroy his standing, affect his business relationships, complicate his children's prospects for marriage. But before William could answer, Eleanor spoke. He acknowledges it, she said firmly. Catherine is William's daughter. She's Margaret's half-sister. She's part of this family, whether we like it or not. She turned to Margaret. I know this is shocking, Margaret, but you need to understand something. Your father made mistakes when he was young. We all do. The question is whether we have the courage to make them right. Margaret looked between Catherine and her mother, tears starting in her own eyes. She's my sister? Half-sister, Eleanor corrected. But yes, she's your family. Margaret walked slowly toward Catherine, who stood rigid, clearly overwhelmed. When Margaret reached her, she did something unexpected. She took Catherine's hand. I'm sorry, Margaret said simply. I'm sorry for what was done to you and your mother. I'm sorry my father, our father, failed you. But if you'll let me, I'd like to know you. I'd like to have a sister. Catherine stared at Margaret's hand holding hers, and something in her face softened. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. I don't know how to be part of a family that owned me, that still technically owns me until the papers are signed. Then we'll figure it out together, Margaret said. All of us. The weeks that followed were complex and painful in ways that defied easy description. William had the manumission papers drawn up immediately, calling in the most reputable lawyer in 3 counties to ensure the documents would withstand any legal challenge. The lawyer, a man named Robert Patterson, who had known the Crawford family for 20 years, raised his eyebrows at the request, but asked no questions. By Mississippi law in 1852, manumission required legislative approval or the posting of a bond and proof that the freed person would leave the state within a specified time period. William posted a substantial bond and arranged for Catherine to technically leave Mississippi by establishing legal residence in Louisiana, even though she would physically remain at Rosewood for the transition period. But freedom papers didn't erase 17 years of deception or heal the wound of discovering you'd been enslaved while believing yourself free. The papers were just ink and vellum, Legal fiction trying to address a psychological devastation that had no legal remedy. Catherine stayed at Rosewood while she decided what to do next, living in a strange liminal space. Legally free, but emotionally uncertain. Publicly acknowledged as William's daughter, but still processing the trauma of learning that her entire identity had been constructed on a foundation of lies. The first few days were the hardest. Catherine barely ate, barely slept, barely spoke. She would sit for hours in the room William had given her, one of the finest guest chambers, with views of the gardens and furnishings imported from France, and stare at nothing, processing the impossible reality that everything she had believed about herself was false. She was not the daughter of an unknown father and Marie Beaumont, free woman of color. She was the daughter of William Crawford, plantation owner, and Marie, enslaved woman who had been purchased to hide an inconvenient pregnancy. She was not a free woman who had chosen to become a governess. She was an enslaved woman who had been deceived for 17 years into believing she had choices when she had none. The enslaved people at Rosewood knew something extraordinary was happening. They saw a mixed-race woman arrive as a supposed governess, saw her taken to the servants' quarters, then saw her elevated to a guest room. They heard the shouting, saw the family's turmoil, and drew their own conclusions. The gossip spread through the quarters with the speed that news always traveled in enslaved communities. Through careful conversations at the well, through whispered exchanges in the fields, through the elaborate system of information sharing that existed beneath the surface of plantation life. An old woman named Esther, who had worked in the Crawford household for 30 years, came to Catherine's room on the third day after her arrival. She knocked softly and entered when Catherine didn't respond, carrying a tray with food that Catherine hadn't requested. "You need to eat," Esther said simply, setting the tray on the table by the window. "Starving yourself won't change what happened." Catherine looked at her, this woman who was still enslaved while Catherine had been granted freedom. "How can you work here?" Catherine asked. "How can you serve him, knowing what he is?" Esther sat down uninvited, her old bones creaking. "Child, I've been enslaved my whole life. 63 years. I've served 3 generations of Crawfords. I know exactly what they are. But I also know what I am. I'm not my circumstances. I'm not the papers that say I'm property. I'm Esther, and I survive." She paused, studying Catherine with eyes that had seen too much. "You're angry. Good. You should be angry. But don't let that anger destroy you from inside. Use it. Build something with it." "What can I build?" Catherine asked bitterly. "I'm free now, according to papers I didn't ask for. But I don't know who I am. Everything I thought I knew was a lie." "No," Esther said firmly. "Not everything. Your mother loved you. That was true. Mr. Whitfield protected you. That was true. You're educated, intelligent, capable, all true. The lie was about your legal status, not about your value as a person. Don't let discovering the lie make you forget the truths." The conversation marked a turning point. Catherine began to eat again, to leave her room, to engage with the impossible situation she found herself in. She and Margaret began a cautious friendship that neither of them quite knew how to navigate. They were half-sisters, separated by circumstance and law and 17 years of living in completely different worlds. Margaret had grown up in privilege, accepting slavery as natural and inevitable, never questioning the system that gave her comfort at others' expense. Catherine had grown up believing herself free but constrained, educated but limited, living in the strange space that free people of color occupied in antebellum New Orleans, neither enslaved nor fully free, neither white nor relegated to slavery's absolute bottom. Their first real conversation happened in the library, a week after Catherine's arrival. Margaret found her there, reading a German philosophy text that Catherine had brought from New Orleans. "You read German?" Margaret asked, genuinely surprised. "Yes," Catherine said, "and French and Spanish. Mr. Whitfield believed education should be as broad as possible." She paused. "Though I suppose he believed that because he knew I'd need every advantage in a world that would never fully accept me." Margaret sat down across from her. "I'm sorry," she said. "I keep saying that, but I don't know what else to say. I'm sorry for what Father did to your mother. I'm sorry you were deceived. I'm sorry I didn't recognize you as my sister immediately." "How could you?" Catherine asked. "You didn't know I existed. But I should have questioned things more. Should have wondered why the world is the way it is." Margaret gestured around the library, at the thousands of books representing centuries of human thought. All this knowledge, all these ideas about justice and morality and human rights, and we just accept that some people are property. How did I never see the contradiction? "Because you benefited from not seeing it," Catherine said bluntly. "That's how all injustice perpetuates. The people who benefit don't look too closely, and the people who suffer don't have the power to make them look." Margaret absorbed this, her face showing genuine distress. "What do I do with that knowledge now that I have it?" "I don't know," Catherine admitted. "I'm still figuring out what to do with knowledge I didn't want. I was happier when I thought I was free. Ignorance, it turns out, can be a mercy." "But it's not real," Margaret said. "Happiness built on not knowing the truth isn't real happiness." "Maybe not," Catherine agreed. "But it's easier than this." She gestured at the space between them, the complicated tangle of family and history and guilt that connected them. "This is real, but it's not easier." They sat in silence for a while, two sisters reading in a library, trying to build something from the wreckage of revelation. Over the following weeks, they continued these conversations, teaching each other things they'd never expected to learn. Margaret, who had grown up accepting slavery as natural and inevitable, began to question everything about the system she'd been raised in. She started paying attention to the enslaved people around her, seeing them as individuals with thoughts and feelings and families, rather than as background elements of her comfortable life. She asked Catherine questions about what life had been like in New Orleans, what it meant to live as a free person of color in a slave society, how Catherine had felt learning she'd been enslaved all along. Catherine, who had believed herself educated and worldly, realized how much her education had been shaped by the lie of freedom. She had studied philosophy and read about human rights and believed herself enlightened. But she had never really confronted what it meant to be enslaved, had never fully engaged with the reality that her mother had experienced and that she herself had legally been subject to for 17 years. Now she read the same books with different eyes, seeing how many great thinkers had justified slavery, how easily educated people rationalized the system, how knowledge alone didn't prevent moral blindness. Eleanor Crawford watched all of this with a mixture of emotions she couldn't quite untangle. She had lost something when Catherine arrived. The illusion of her marriage's integrity, perhaps, or the comfort of not having to confront her husband's past directly. But she had also gained something. Margaret was becoming a deeper, more thoughtful person. William, forced to face his mistakes, was becoming more honest. And Catherine herself, despite everything, showed a strength that Eleanor reluctantly admired. One evening, Eleanor invited Catherine to take tea with her in the morning room. It was a formal invitation, delivered by Esther, and Catherine understood it was significant. She dressed carefully in one of the dresses Margaret had insisted on giving her. A simple but well-made gown of dark green that brought out the color of her eyes. The Crawford eyes. Their eyes. Eleanor poured tea with perfect grace, a skill honed over 23 years of managing social occasions. "I want to apologize," she said without preamble. "When you arrived, I saw you as a threat. A reminder of my husband's infidelity, a complication that could damage my children's prospects. I treated you as a problem to be managed, rather than as a person who had been deeply wronged." Catherine accepted the teacup, studying Eleanor's face. "And now?" "Now I see you as complicated," Eleanor admitted. "You're my husband's daughter. You're my daughter's half-sister. You're a young woman who has been treated abominably by nearly everyone who should have protected you. And you're also someone who could destroy my family's reputation if you chose to. All of those things are true simultaneously." "I don't want to destroy anything," Catherine said. "I just want—" She paused, searching for words. "I want to understand what happened to me. I want to decide who I am now that I know the truth. And I want justice for my mother, though I don't know what that justice looks like." "Your mother?" Eleanor said slowly. "William loved her, you know. It wasn't just casual. He loved her, and he was too weak to act on that love in any way that mattered." "Do you hate her?" Catherine asked. "Marie?" Eleanor considered this. "I did once, when I first suspected. But how could I hate her? She was enslaved. She had no power, no choices. Whatever happened between her and William, it happened within a context where she couldn't say no, not really. The power imbalance was too great. So no, I don't hate her. I pity her. And I'm sorry for what she endured." Catherine felt tears prick her eyes. No one had said that before, that her mother deserved pity and sorrow rather than judgment. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for saying that." Eleanor reached across and did something surprising. She took Catherine's hand. "You're remarkably strong," she said. "Given everything you've learned, everything you've lost, most people would have crumbled. You're still standing, still thinking, still trying to make sense of senseless things. That strength comes from Marie. Whatever else happened, she raised you to be resilient. That's a gift." William, meanwhile, was discovering that acknowledging a mistake doesn't erase it. He had signed the manumission papers, acknowledged Catherine publicly, established a trust fund for her support. But none of this addressed the fundamental wrong of having abandoned Marie, of having never checked on his daughter, of having profited from a system that enslaved people, including his own child. He tried to talk to Catherine about this, seeking absolution or perhaps just understanding. But she wasn't ready to give up either. "You want me to forgive you," Catherine said one evening when William cornered her in the library. "You want me to say that what you did was understandable given the circumstances, that you were young and scared, that you've made amends. But I can't say that. I can't forgive you for abandoning my mother. She loved you, and you let her be sold away like furniture." "I know," William said miserably. "I know I failed her. Failed you. I was a coward." "Yes," Catherine agreed. "You were. And the terrible thing is, you're not unusual. There are probably hundreds of men like you, thousands maybe, across the South. Men who fathered children with enslaved women and then did nothing. Men who let their children be sold, be enslaved, be treated as property. You're not a monster, Father. You're just ordinary. And that's somehow worse." William flinched at the word father. Catherine used it sometimes now, but never warmly, never affectionately. She used it as a title, a statement of biological fact, rather than emotional connection. "What can I do to make this right?" he asked. Nothing, Catherine said. You can't make it right. The time for that was 17 years ago, or even better, 24 years ago, when you could have chosen not to abandon my mother. What you can do now is live with it. Sit with the discomfort of knowing you failed us. Use that discomfort to be better, to do better, to dismantle the system that made your failures possible. The system, William repeated. Slavery. Yes, Catherine said. Slavery. You profit from it, Father. Every day, every dollar that maintains this plantation, that buys your imported furniture and your fine clothes, comes from enslaved labor. You freed me, but you still hold 243 other people in bondage. How do you reconcile that? William had no answer. Over the following weeks, this question haunted him. He had always considered himself a relatively humane slave owner. He didn't separate families unnecessarily. He didn't permit harsh overseers. He provided adequate food and shelter. But Catherine's presence made him see these kindnesses for what they were. Minor mitigations of a fundamentally evil system. You couldn't be a humane slave owner any more than you could be a humane kidnapper. The kindness was beside the point when the underlying relationship was wrong. One evening, several weeks after the revelation, Catherine sat with William in his study. The conversation had become less awkward over time, though the father-daughter relationship they were trying to build was fragile, weighted by years of absence. Why did you really free me? Catherine asked. Was it because it was right? Or because you were afraid of what people would say? William considered the question carefully. Both, perhaps. I'd like to say it was pure morality, that I freed you because enslaving one's own daughter is unconscionable. But I'm also aware that keeping you enslaved would have been impossible once the truth was known. So maybe I did the right thing for partially wrong reasons. Does that make the freedom less real? I don't know, Catherine admitted. I'm still trying to understand what freedom even means. For 17 years, I thought I was free, but I wasn't. Now I have legal papers saying I'm free, but I feel more trapped than ever because I can't unknow what I know about myself, about my mother, about how easily freedom can be an illusion. Your mother loved you very much, William said. I want you to know that. Marie was remarkable, intelligent, kind, strong. She made Thomas promise to protect you, to give you the education and opportunities she'd never had. Everything good in your life came from her determination that you would be more than the system wanted you to be. And everything painful came from you abandoning her, Catherine said bluntly. William nodded. Yes, I was 23 and cowardly. I loved her. I did love her. But not enough to risk what loving her would cost me. So I let Thomas take her away, and I never asked about you. And I built my life pretending the chapter had closed cleanly. It didn't. Sins don't close cleanly, Catherine. They wait, and then they come back. As me, Catherine said. I came back. The evidence of your sin walking into your house. Not as sin, William corrected. As consequence, as truth, as... He paused, searching for words. As a person who deserved better than I gave you. I can't undo the past. But I can acknowledge it, claim you as my daughter, and try to help you build whatever future you want. Catherine stood, walking to the window where William had stood that first day, looking out at the plantation that was beautiful and terrible in its implications. I'm going back to New Orleans, she said. There's a school there for free colored children. They need teachers who understand both worlds, the world of education and privilege, and the world of enslavement and struggle. I can do that now. I can teach children who need to believe in themselves, who need to know that freedom is possible even when the world tells them otherwise. "I'll provide funds for the school," William said. "Whatever you need." "I don't want your money," Catherine said. "Or rather, I don't want money given out of guilt. If you truly acknowledge me as your daughter, then treat me as such. Set up a legitimate trust, equal to what you'd give Margaret. Support the school as my father, not as a wealthy man assuaging his conscience." William felt a strange mixture of pride and shame. His daughter, and she was his daughter, undeniably, in courage, if not in circumstance, was claiming her rights, defining her terms. "Yes," he agreed. "That's fair. That's right." Catherine turned back to him. "I don't forgive you," she said clearly. "Not yet. Maybe not ever. You abandoned my mother. You let me grow up without a father. You profited from a system that enslaved people like me while producing a child who was enslaved. That's not something I can just forgive because you wrote some legal papers. But..." She paused. "But I'm willing to try to know you, to build something, even if it can't undo the past. Is that enough?" "It's more than I deserve," William said honestly. "It's more than I hoped for." Catherine left Rosewood in December 1852, returning to New Orleans with legal freedom papers, a substantial trust fund, and a sister who wrote to her regularly. She established the Beaumont School for Free Colored Children in 1853, using her education and her Crawford family connections to create opportunities for children who, like her, existed in the complicated space between slavery and freedom. Margaret visited the school in 1854, despite the scandal it caused in Mississippi society. She brought donations, supplies, and her own awakening understanding that the system she'd grown up accepting was profoundly wrong. William Crawford lived with his choices. He acknowledged Catherine publicly as his daughter, which cost him some business relationships and considerable social standing. Eleanor stayed with him, having made her own choice to see their marriage as something that could be repaired rather than discarded. They worked together to quietly support Catherine's school and, as the years passed and tensions between North and South increased, to help enslaved people escape north through the Underground Railroad connections Catherine developed. When the Civil War came in 1861, William was 57 years old. He opposed secession, which made him unpopular in Mississippi. When Union forces occupied the area in 1863, he cooperated with them, helping to document which enslaved people had been held on which plantations, facilitating the chaos of emancipation. Some called him traitor. Others understood he was trying to make amends. Catherine came to Rosewood in 1865, after the war ended, and found her father much aged, the plantation much reduced, but the family, complex, broken, trying, still intact. "We built something," William said to her, walking through the ruins of the only life he'd known. "Not what I intended, not what your mother would have wanted, but something." Catherine looked at Rosewood, at the empty slave quarters being dismantled, at the fields being divided among formerly enslaved people trying to establish themselves as free farmers, at her father aged by war and guilt and the collapse of his world. "You built a reckoning," she said. "For yourself, for all of us. That's not nothing." "It's not enough," William insisted. "It will never be enough." "No," Catherine agreed. "But it's something. And as I learned a long time ago, something is better than nothing." They stood together in the ruins of the plantation, father and daughter, slave owner and enslaved. People connected by blood and separated by history, trying to imagine what the new world might look like. William died in 1869, having seen his daughter establish one of the most successful schools for freed people in Louisiana, having watched his legitimate daughter Margaret become an advocate for women's education and racial justice. having lived long enough to see the system he'd profited from crumble. In his will, he split his remaining estate 3 ways: 1/3 to Eleanor, 1/3 to Margaret, and 1/3 to Catherine, acknowledging her explicitly and legally as his daughter and heir. Catherine Beaumont Crawford, she had taken his name after the war, lived until 1902, dying at age 67, having educated thousands of students, having preserved her mother's memory in a biography that told the truth about slavery's intimate violations, and having built a legacy that transcended the circumstances of her birth. The story of William and Catherine Crawford doesn't offer easy redemption. William never fully escaped the guilt of what he'd done. Abandoning Marie, failing Catherine, profiting from slavery while producing a child who was enslaved. Catherine never fully forgave him, though she built a relationship with him that was real, if complicated. But what they did together, the school, the acknowledgement, the small acts of resistance against the system, mattered. Not enough to balance the scales, never enough for that, but enough to prove that even people born into terrible systems can choose to resist them, can work to dismantle them, can build something better from the ruins. This story reminds us that the cruelest aspects of slavery were often the most intimate. The violation of families, the creation of children who were property, the psychological torture of living as enslaved while being told you were free. But it also shows us that confronting these truths, painful as they are, is the only path toward anything resembling justice. What do you think? Could William's acknowledgement of Catherine ever make up for abandoning her mother? Can someone who profited from slavery be redeemed? Leave your comment below. If you found this story meaningful and want more hidden histories like this, subscribe and share. These stories need to be told. They need to be remembered. See you in the next one.